Welcome everyone to the Mind Game of Basketball 101 with Yourself podcast. Another episode today where we're very happy to welcome Rafal Juc. So, Rafal, thank you for coming with us today.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
So, Rafal, we have been in touch for a while through internet network, through LinkedIn, through Instagram, things like this. And we finally connected at B8 Summit the other day in Vilnius through Benas Matkevich's beautiful day in Vilnius connecting. And you were talking how you actually listened to the podcast before, listened to Oliver Kostic's episode eventually too, and it came to my mind that I thought it was nice to have you on board, not only because of your position as a scout for the Denver Nuggets, but also for the values that you shared, for the conversation we had. Because as we know in everything that we do, of course there is professionalism, of course there is content, but it's also about the people and the energy that you share with people. And I like your energy, so thank you for coming over.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you actually said it. That was a very nice day in Vilnius, and that was nice for some reasons, especially like me getting to know you. But at the same time, I promised my wife a nice weekend in Lithuania, and that was, 12 degrees and raining for the whole day. So I
Yeah.
don't know if it was really nice, but that was amazing energy, like you said, the great vibes, and hats off to Benas, especially for putting this event together. Is beyond my words, and the gratitude I have for him for being so passionate about the game and providing a platform for people mind alike, so we can just talk and network and share experience, and at the end of the day realize we all have the same issues, the same problems. So I really look forward just catching up with you.
I agree with you. And you see, I'm going to make a transition with another one that we talk about too. It's about Luca Virgilio, who was another guest in the podcast. So I had Benas in the podcast a few years back, Luca a few months ago, and now you, and now everybody's connected again.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's all connected, especially me and Luca. It's almost like sliding doors moment. Like I told you, I was supposed to go to St. John's. That was always a dream of mine, to be a graduate assistant to study in the US. I had been preparing for that for a while. I was actually already accepted. I was in New York on the campus, getting to know the coaches, and just in a blink of an eye, I got the once in a lifetime opportunity to actually start working for NBA team. The question was presented to me almost like, "Hey, you want to be pro or you want to go to college?" And the way the question was being framed is almost like I had no choice. So without even studying or even reading through it, and I don't even know like what was my first salary. I just asked, "Hey, where can I just sign it up?" So that was always a dream of mine. But it kind of brings me to the Luca connection, because at the time he was a colleague of mine from the Eurohope scouting service. And just because that particular university, St. John's, they were looking for someone with international background, they were really ahead of their times. I suggested Luca, and the rest of history. I mean, last year he was the GM of the year college basketball, so seems like worked out pretty well for him.
right. And so you see, there is another thing that we actually talked about several people. We talked about Luca, who's Italian. We talked about Benas, who's Lithuanian. We mentioned Oliver Kostic, who is Serbian. Now you're Polish, and I'm French. So everybody that we have spoken about right now, it's a different nationality. And even though in the end we're all connected one way or another, we all share, like we discussed before the start of the podcast, we all share the same passion, and we look for like-minded people. So that's what I want to do with you today. In the podcast, make sure that through your job and eventually your career, your development, but also through the thing that you're looking for in your job in other players and organizations and coaches. I want to make sure that we address that, the values and eventually the challenges that we can share and that you can meet on a different on a consistent basis through your work.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is the beauty of this profession, that, I always tell people basketball takes me to different places and connects me with people that I would never be able to connect with. And something that is going to stay with me beyond my professional career, all of the friendships, all of the connections. I have friends for life, and I'm very blessed and fortunate to be able to travel to so many different places. And I feel like it's a really eye-opening experience. And the more you do it, the more you realize that first is a person, second is a basketball player. And it took me a while to actually realize each one of us is different, and it is some beauty to it. We all are wired differently. We express ourselves differently. And that's why even in my profession as a basketball scout, it's so really important to understand what is like deep, in root for that person, who he is, what made him who he is. And that's why I really try to listen to podcasts like yours. I try to read books like yours and some others, just because I really want to understand the mental aspect of the game. Because quite frankly, if when you look at the NBA, court, there isn't really as much separation skill wise, but there probably the biggest upside can be made, and especially for us in terms of the projection. And because this is what I'm doing on daily basis, trying to evaluate players and project them, is the mental side of things. And usually we always tell it's almost like an equation: skill plus the bad athleticism can be multiplied by the mental side of the things.
Right, right. And like you say, it's always a question for people like, how much is the mental side? What's the percentage of the importance? People like data now, and they want justifications. And I think it's hard to say like a specific percentage, right? But we know that it does help uh, to have another tool in the toolbox. And the mental side is really something that, like you said, can multiply, duplicate, like duplicate the power of every other skill that you already have. I mean, somebody who knows how to drive and shoot, if he does it with the confidence and the right intensity, with the clarity of his mind, then hopefully, he's gonna be a lot more efficient at it than somebody who's gonna be doubting or asking himself question and and having more doubts in his mind. So, for sure, for sure. Now, I would like to ask you, um, what is it that, like, I saw several times in your posts like things that I can relate to a lot, and I would like you to eventually define how the mental game in your job, specifically as a scout, what is it that you look at, and if eventually, I mean, whatever you can obviously express, but what is it that you look at in players, in organizations, in coaches, uh, and then I would ask you to eventually define the pros, the what you really see that you feel like is really good, and then eventually the cons. What's really like some challenges, some struggles, and how you deal with those too.
Yeah. So, first of all, for each player, his own basketball journey is usually, being looked upon through his own individual lens. So he's got the big support of his family, his environment. But me working on a team side, specifically working for Denver Nuggets in that case, um, I cannot really forget that I've been working for this organization. And, basketball, unlike some other individual sports, it's a team sport. So we always say, you know, that might be the most talented basketball player, but first of all, he needs to be accepted by the group as a person before he can be accepted as a basketball player. So oftentimes when you see a player not really working out in one particular setting, or with a group of coaches or a group of players, most of the time is because of the personality, the lack of fit, the character, the mental side, however you want to call it, and much less and less frequently is for basketball reasons. And that's why I'm always trying to picture myself doing this mental exercise, how this particular player would actually look in our locker room, how he would look with the rest of the guys. Would he gel well? Would he mesh with them? Would he be popular? Because and it's very particular topic as well on the NBA side of the things, because oftentimes players themselves, they decide who's gonna be accepted. It's such an elite group of athletes, is even 1% is probably even less, So and you can, I feel like over my experience professionally working for the Nuggets, I feel like there are two easiest paths to get accepted in this elite club, if you will. First of all, is having the elite physical tools. So so they say like you look the part as a basketball player, but this can be pretty tricky. The other one is either being the hardest worker or having the special basketball intelligence. So the players, when they talk to you, they can really smell it and can see it. And that's why, at least in my experience, the more I do it, the more I try to focus on those mental aspects of the things. And for us, what we are trying to do is obviously we try to collect as much information about the family background. Where are you coming from? What is your motivation to play basketball? Who are the most influential people in your career? Because the best indication of the future is the past. So, are there any lessons we can actually take away from players how he handled injuries in the past? What type of coaches he was the most successful with? What type of teammates he enjoyed to play the most with? What were some of the biggest challenges or maybe his failures in his career? And that's why the word that is now such a common phrase, Intel stands for intelligence, and it comes from FBI, CIA, just preparing for the operational common ground and to see what's store for them on operations. And that's why in our job is not even to make a decision, but also to know, because we accept the player with everything, the whole baggage, if you will, that comes with him, his family, his behaviors, his tendencies, his past as well, and obviously his future. So we also try to provide as much intel as we can to our coaches, players, to know how to deal with the player.
Right. And I think it's interesting because right now we're like, let's say before mid-August, we still have players and teams in Europe that are figuring things out about like where to play for the coming season. Um, and I do discuss this with the players I work with individually and the teams eventually, where at that time of the year, everybody feels like everybody's beautiful, everybody's going to succeed, and I feel like it really is a challenge, and let's say on the mental side, on the perspective side, that at that time of the year when you recruit a player, you often see only the positive things. So my question is, I understand the thorough background check that you guys are doing, and I'm going to challenge you with one thing that you eventually said without saying, just to share the message with the people, with the listeners. Um, you said that you're paying attention about, how the player can fit, and very often into positive, aspirations, like his role and his identity and what he can bring. But how much do you pay attention when you're talking about anticipating situations? How much do you anticipate the fact that how would that guy handle a challenging situation? Because this is right now something that you eventually didn't discuss, but like I'm sure that you didn't wait for me to tell you something like this to think about it. I just feel like this is something that many teams who are less equipped in terms of scouting services pay attention to, and that it is hurting them later in the season because they look so much into optimizing their recruitment that they feel like they haven't paid attention. Okay, if the shit hits the fan, what's going to happen? You know what I mean? And to me, I feel the same in my job. Like when I work with people, I want to make sure that, okay, before we talk, we're going to build this to be performing. But if something happens and it's a challenging situation, there's adversity, can I trust those people? Can we work together? How do we react in those situations? You know what I mean? So can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about this from your side?
No, absolutely. Especially like you said, August is more of a honeymoon period because right now everybody's 0-0, so
Yeah,
nobody lost a game yet, and that's why it's so
exactly.
glamorous, so beautiful, and is the spirits are running up high. Everybody's fresh,
Right.
everybody's anxious and willing to get back to work, and it's I think it's also important to say in basketball, adversity is just part of the process. Is nothing negative. Is something to be ashamed of. And I feel like the best basketball teams they use adversity to actually come together and to come better out of it. And obviously, for us, the most challenging and the most difficult part and aspect of a scout's job is the projection. So it's not only who this player is right now or what he can bring to the table, but like I said, what are the strengths and weaknesses, but also what are the opportunities and threats. Is a typical SWOT analysis that we try to do with a huge emphasis on the mental side of the things. Okay, this player usually I want to say December, he can be overloaded physically, mentally, and this is something that really have to flag. This happened consistently over the period of time, and this is also a very valuable piece of information I can even provide my coaches, and that's why again, this stands for intelligence, and I always tell people for scout, our currency is information. The more information you have, the richer you are. That's why we have certain, rules and process in place. That's why, for example, in my case, I really like to talk at least to the last three head coaches and teammates from three different teams, because also every situation is different. So you really have to be able to understand the whole context what really made player behave the way he did. Maybe he was angry and mad because he was not getting paid on time, and he was in the middle of the losing season, and there was a car in contract that was provided, and that never happened. So I will never blame a player without really trying to put myself in his shoes. I feel like this job has really taught me a lot about the compassion, empathy, and also trying to kind of minimize the risk and trying to understand what the player is going through. So oftentimes we just judge him and we look at him purely what happened as far as the on-court production and his value on the court. But I feel like the more you can, deep dive and study and realize who is a player, what he's going through, what struggles, what moment of the season he's in as well. And that's why I really like to. I always tell people the biggest value in my job is to be able to follow player over a period of time. So it's absolutely different type of scouting. If I just get a name in summer and now I jump on him and I have a week to study. What I really like to do, if I follow a player closely, in my case, I like to see it pay. Just to give an example, let's say he's weak, physically fragile. So I like to map on a calendar the game against the most physical team in the league. Or I like to watch a game when they just, lost five in a row. So for me, every life evaluation, especially if I go to watch a game in person, needs to be with a certain purpose, and there needs to be a certain question behind what I'm really trying to take away with. So I know that was kind of a long answer, and I touched a lot of different topics, but I you're smiling, so hopefully I hit the right button.
Yeah, no, I think it's really nice to see again through the way that you explain things, your professionalism, your level, your standards, and at the same time I smile because we had addressed this. I had a podcast the other day in French with Florent Pietrus, who is a legendary French player for the ones who don't know him yet, and he was telling me also about how his what's so important for him, growing up and as a young basketball player, and then that he carried his entire career. And right now, when you're telling me and explaining the way that you work, there is your why too. Why do I go to that game? Why do I watch this guy? What do I do with it? So there is always a reason, and you don't just do things to do things, but there is always a why that is important, that is guiding your the way that you carry your job. And I think that's important to remember, that regardless if you're a scout, a coach, or a player, the why that drives us brings the motivation, but also leads us to performance and to execute at a high level, regardless of our position.
Yeah, I think there's also a misconception in business world, but even more so in basketball or sports in general, that sometimes we mistake activity for achievement, which is a famous quote for John Wooden. But at the same time, sometimes we feel like working hard is not always equal working smart. So obviously now with all the new technology at our disposal, AI, but also synergy, outside, outsourcing, outside scouting services and whatnot, I feel like now it even puts the human element even more in center, because it's a person who's making decisions using all the tools you have at your display. So like logically thinking, it should make your job easier, or at least more process oriented, or maybe give you more space and room to realize another aspect as a human being. Because I feel like what is very dangerous threat, and regardless whether you're coach, player, scout, if you're only being defined by your professional position, title, job, it once that is taken away, it kind of rips your whole personality and your identity away. And this is something very dangerous. I oftentimes see that player, his whole career he's been a starter, and if that's taken away from him, he doesn't even know who he is. So like that's why for me the why is maybe even the most important question. Why you play basketball, what you want to achieve, how you define success. And it's a very cool exercise that we do with the Nuggets almost every year. So we try to speak the same language, so to speak. So for you, fast player might be absolutely different definition of fast than for myself. And it is something we took from the kindergarten education, that oftentimes you take two kids, you set them, with their backs, and the teacher tells them, paint for me a big house. For you, big house can be for the whole page. For me, big house might be just half the page. And you think it's the same message, the same words, exactly the same words, but it's a different outcome. And the same happens oftentimes just because of stuff is getting lost in translation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Right now, there is so much content that you're sharing that we have to stop sentence by sentence to dive deep. For example, into things that I work with players individually on the mental side. You talked about the identity of the player. You talked about their objectives, but there is also their environment, like you said earlier, about that impacts them so much. And I was just listening to a podcast earlier about Edwin Jackson when he explained that when he retired from the French national team, he explained that he was disappointed that he wasn't taken that one time and that he wasn't called for. And when then he saw the list, he wasn't happy with it. So he was emotional. He was a little upset. He was, like confused. There was a lack of communication because the coach hadn't talked to him and things like this. So it's an accumulation of things. But then he said, all right, I had been drinking a little bit, celebrating with my friends, and it was summer, whatever, he was doing his thing. But then he said, one of my buddies said, oh, that guy is disrespecting you. So basically, his environment at that time was the drop of water that just made it go and okay, I quit this. I'm done, and that's it. And so it's just an example that I got from just watching this like a half an hour ago and saying how basically at every level the environment is so important because it sometimes it guides you, sometimes it challenges you, sometimes supports you, and it's really so important to have an environment that friends can be friends, like you said, and the competitive side has to be the competitive side. And sometimes it's not easy for players and everybody in the world of performance to be able to find the right balance between let me be the one nice person that I'm aside because I need this to be in a healthy relationship aside. But when I switch into the competitive mode, I need to be on my track to competitiveness.
No, absolutely, especially in a world of the high performance where the margin for error is so thin.
Right.
I'm a huge proponent, a huge advisor of not being afraid to ask for help, and that's why I feel like the services that you provide and mental coaches in general is something that is so underrated. Just because players' environment is one thing, and there is not a single parent in the world that is operating out of a bad faith. But
Right.
unfortunately, I always tell people like if you look to make some financial investment, with all due respect, you probably don't ask your grandmother. You probably ask a financial advisor. And the same should be applied to basketball because people who are the closest to us, they care the most. But the first question is, are they actually qualified enough to help us? Second of all, they able to see the big picture. So sometimes they can do more harm than good
Right.
just because of the nature of it. They, by definition, try to support you, they try to help you, but at the same time, maybe they don't have the objectives. And that's why there is a lot of confusion happens when either sides are not aligned or people are not on the same page. And this is also a big challenge for us as a Nuggets or like in general, specifically talking NBA teams. We try to involve and draw in players' environment, parents, coaches, high school buddies. And that's why, first of all, what we do, we map the map of influence. Who are the most influential people in that player environment? Who he is actually listening to? Who's in his ear, so to speak? Because coach is typically a voice you can probably hear 2 hours per day, which means the rest of the day, in that case, 12 to 16 hours a day, might be his mom, might be his father, might be his high school coach. So now is our responsibility to see, are those messages aligned? Are we on the same page? Because again, I'm not saying your environment, your parents, your brothers and coaches can operate in bad faith. Maybe they're not qualified, or maybe they operate without the full information.
Right.
That's why it's better, I feel like, sometimes just to remove the emotional component out of it and ask for help of a qualified specialist.
Yeah. I totally agree, and once again, I think you went into details and explained very thoroughly, and yet we still have so many. It's not like if there was one truth to it, right? It's like you might prevent, like you're kind of a risk manager too, right? It's like you're trying to prevent risk from happening. You want to optimize the percentage of success of the relationship, the collaboration with players, but you never know. You never know in the end, like how it's gonna end up. Like. How Nikola Jokic became Nikola Jokic. Did you think he was going to become that player? How many people thought that he was going to become that player? Did a lot of people in the NBA when Giannis came into the league thought Giannis would go into the league? Even Luca, who was high European potential, people were still doubting him, you know? So like it really is tricky to find out. And I think that what you're saying about all those elements added one to another, um, eventually try to erase risk and optimize possibility of the field of possibilities, right?
Yeah, I mean, many people are actually surprised when I tell them that scouting is more about elimination than anything else. We try to eliminate the bad apples, so to speak. And obviously, us in NBA, we're so privileged and so lucky that we operate in a situation that essentially we can choose which player we want. And this is probably more of a bubble. You know, when you look down at the grassroots or the youth level, obviously you have a different responsibility as a teacher. And then it shouldn't be all about the performance, but in our case, it's a business. And first of all, you try to get rid of or not even touch, players that can be harmless to your organization, to your team, whether that is, injury prone, toxic environment, bad character, a lack of, a fit with the team, and all those type of things. Because we always tell one bad move can really set you back much more than one good transfer can help you.
And so there is a thought that comes back to me since earlier too, though, because with all the analysis that you do, all the researches that you make, do you like delete? It's not delete, but when you look for a player, are there some situations, maybe ones that you say, okay, look, this one is not possible. We cannot work with them. But there are the ones that eventually, like a player has gone through adversity, has gone through challenges, maybe misbehave at some point, you know what I mean? And I guess I would say that even though he might have misbehaved in the past, doesn't mean that that player is going to be not going to be able to be a weapon for us. And I'm going to take, for example, Ažuolas Tubelis in Lithuania and in Žalgiris. You know, when he was younger, he had an episode of spitting on the logo, when he was young and wild. And there were, discussions about it. Can we take him? Is he going to be okay? And this and that. And we're happy to see Ažuolas Tubelis right now playing at the best of his abilities and bringing all he can to Žalgiris, being one of the main leaders of the team. So it's just one specific example explaining how some behaviors that might not be the ones that you might want at first, and you might control the risk about, yes, this is inadmissible, or this is, we can grow from this. What do you think about this? How do you deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, you touch on so many interesting topics. First of all, I feel like many up and coming players, they don't even realize how much reputation can cost you. Like you mentioned before, is August, is the off season time, is time of making new moves. And oftentimes, when I'm getting a phone call from a friend who's a sports director or a GM, they don't really ask me, can this guy put the ball in basketball? But they ask me, hey, what is his work ethic? Can he take constructive criticism? And I always tell young players, uh, look in the mirror and do like a, soul search exercise. What is my reputation as a teammate? What is my reputation as a player? What people actually think of me? Have you ever actually even thought about it? Go and ask your coach, go and ask your teammate. Just carry that thought with you going forward, just because one phone call can cost you thousands of dollars, if not more, and sometimes might be, for wrong reasons. And like you even mentioned with Ažuolas Tubelis, I feel like, and this is my personal philosophy, every player deserves second opportunity or another chance, but not every player is always ready. And that's why is my job, first of all, to see what is the state of mind, and did he learn his lesson? And obviously, we all change, we all grow, we all develop, we all mature, and situation change in our life. Players getting married, they're getting kids, then getting cut, and they face adversity and they come better out of it. And I feel like it's also another topic that oftentimes basketball fans, they just can't believe. Like one team, a player was struggling, and then he get moved somewhere else, and all of a sudden he's great. Also, because in basketball, we are byproduct of our environment, and that's why specifically in that case, I always try to project the player, our locker room with our coaches, our players, but also this particular role he's supposed to play with us. That's why it's so tricky, and that's why it's such a thorough exercise.
Right, right. I understand completely. I agree with you with everything you said. I think like what I notice regularly with players is like, for example, right now when you tell me about the accountability part, which is huge, and I think that it's missing with a lot of players. I also think that there are many things. I tell everybody that I work with the same thing. Um, I do have a job in part because so many things are taken for granted, and it can be about a simple thing as being in the corner and doing a negative step and stepping out of bounds for even EuroLeague or NBA players who practice so much and are such good players. But because in the game, in practice, we eventually let them go out of bounds, so we don't work on the spatial awareness and we don't work on making the side step instead of negative step and things like this. Eventually, it carries on in the game, and then they turn the ball over stupidly like this. But this is just one example to say that you explained that you would expect players to understand the importance of those things, of the accountability, the responsibility, and understanding who they are, what it takes to go, the way they deal with other people, etc., etc. How they, but once again, it's easy theoretically. It's easy to understand one conversation, right? Everybody understand the same conversation. Everybody who's going to listen to us will understand that, yes, okay, you got to behave to go there. All right. Everybody's watching you at the professional. Okay, we understand. But then when you have players either by themselves, even with their families, you can understand that they need to do that work. They need to do that job. And not, you might have maybe 10% of players who are able to do it by themselves. The rest is like, you got to do like working with players. I work with them every year, some of them every week, some of them several times a week, which means like that consistency, the same way that once again, you work on technical skills, physical conditioning, the mental side cannot just be something said at the preseason. Hey, we expect you to be a good guy. And, accountability is important. No, it's something that you need to carry along the entire season, week after week after week, and prevent situations from happening. And when there is a situation that's critical that you didn't want to happen, how fast do you respond to it? And who do you become in that critical situation? So just to finish on that note, is like, I think where the mental side is very interesting in that side, in that part of it, is it cannot just be theoretical. It has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed before players are in a critical situation.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Exactly. This is what I had in mind, and especially it's not even about knowing, but actually being able to be consistent with it and
Right.
sacrifice to do the right thing. And oftentimes I like to talk with experts from different industries, and lately I've been trying to learn more about methodology and teaching and how to unroot bad habits and stuff. And I was fortunate enough to talk with some experts from the health industry and health and dietary experts, and they've been always telling me each human knows how to eat to be fully in shape, but is each human actually able to do the right thing and eat healthy and eat properly, eat the right way to be in great shape? Not so much. And the same goes for basketball. And that's why the job of a coach or even a parent, especially when you're talking about the youth player, is so important to create the right habit. So that's why I don't really blame a young player for a bad language, but oftentimes I'll blame his coach or his parents, maybe for not being honest with him or not practicing this enough or not maybe putting this to his mind and to realize him how important that is. So if we want players to play hard, but the only thing we talk about are points or highlights or dunks, are we actually preaching the right things, and do we create the right environment for players to carry that message onto their actions? Probably not so much. That's why I'm so passionate, especially lately, talking with the grassroots coaches, youth coaches, because oftentimes they don't even know themselves. They want players to play defense, but maybe they make all the substitutions based only on mistakes on offense. So, subconsciously, they send the wrong message to the players. And that's why, especially lately, I really enjoy doing, stuff like our conversation podcast, but also clinics, conferences, meets, just because I feel like every coach, every parent operates in good faith, but sometimes they're not equipped enough with the right knowledge and the right process.
I agree with you. Okay, you push me too far, so I have to show this. The More Than a Champion book that that I took out, that I written, and that's out now on Amazon. More Than a Champion. It's written for parents, like you say, and because once again, when you say like they don't have the body language, the coach, but the parents should say. But some parents don't know. Some parents don't have the background, right? As athletes, or they don't understand basketball, they don't understand. So it's hard for them to be able to. They are emotionally connected. They want to help, but they don't always know how to. So I humbly wrote this guide for parents to be able to reflect, to learn things, and just to ponder about how they see things happening on their side, and hopefully that will help a lot of parents to feel more in control, and therefore help their kids along the way in their journey in sports, because that's not only for basketball but for all sports. Um, you discussed the fact that you were into clinics, you were into participating more often into podcasts and things like this, and I saw on social media how you were really present in the Polish basketball development. I think this is something that I would like to address with you as well, understanding that Polish basketball wasn't known so much in the European, field, in the European environment. Of course, you have a few players that have a very good career. The championship that I discovered actually last year with a few players that I had playing in there is developing, but I'm sure there are a lot of challenges too. And I feel it's great for the Polish Basketball Federation and its league to have someone like you among some of your friends or whoever you want to work with, to be able to develop so that the next generation has more abilities, more opportunities to grow from this, right? So, what can you tell us a little bit about how you see things happening in Polish basketball and its development?
Yeah, obviously, I'm very proud of being Polish, and in my early formative years in basketball, I was very fortunate at a very young age, at the age of 22, to become a part of the coaching staff of the Polish senior national team, and it really molded me into who I am today as a scout, basketball person, executive coach, but also off the court. That was probably the best years of my life. All the camaraderie, all the emotions, playing for your national team is something you can already describe, and this is something I'm very proud of. And it's a pity I can't do this anymore, but I found different ways to be able to give back and share my expertise, my knowledge, my experience, because I just remember how it was even for myself when I was a young teenager with a crazy dream of working for an NBA team. There wasn't even anybody in Poland that was able to help me, just because such as scouting didn't really exist. So right now, through different platforms, first of all, the Polish Basketball League, we try to organize European Vision Conference that we invite, experts from abroad, from the top leagues, Italy, Germany, Turkey, Spain, that they're able to talk to our office personnel and help them modernize and professionalize the environments. But also something, that I've been doing more and more lately is providing guidance for parents. So, for example, we organize a summit for 100 plus parents with two national team players, which is something very unique. Michał Michalak and Tomasz Gielo, two senior national team players, still active. They're able to get on the stage and just be vulnerable, to share their concerns, their struggles, and tell parents it's exactly normal not to be the best on your team. It's exactly normal not to score the most points. It's exactly normal to get cut. It's exactly normal to lose a game. So we also want to show the human side of it, because I feel like in general sports and a huge crisis right now, first participation, but second of all, the retention. Many kids, they drop out of basketball, and somebody smart told me a sentence: kids, get in sports and basketball because it's fun, but they quit because it's not fun anymore to them. So they don't really quit because of the coach, but they quit because of the feeling that basketball gives to them. And I just know, for me, I was very fortunate. I was in great environment. I had a great coach. Basketball, gave me my professional career, gave me my friends, gave me a passion, gave me great emotion, gave me motivation to get up every day. But not everybody is as fortunate anymore. So I'm trying to really be, vocal and present and talk about it.
You see a lot of games, and we talked a lot about players. From what you just explained about the importance of again having the right environment, and you talked about the coaching part of it. If there was any advice that you would give coaches, what would it be in terms of, again, the mental side of it?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, like I said, we all get into basketball because it's fun. So try to make it loose, try to make it fun, especially right now. I feel like player development is such an underutilized tool because everybody wants to get better, everybody wants to improve, and there could be, using all the technology that are display, it can be measured, because what can be measured can be improved. I feel like now there's a huge need to individualize the practice. So it's not really a challenge that you only have one coach, but I feel like maybe you can, put players in smaller groups. It doesn't really have to be 5-on-5, 5-on-0. Uh, I feel like it's absolutely normal to be transparent, talk with players, be even more of a partner to them, give them honest feedback. Uh, and again, just make it fun. That would be my general advice.
And do you think like a lot of coaches are still going this way, or do you still feel because coaches can be competitors too? Coaches can have a history of playing or not, and sometimes coaches might get lost along the way because they just want to win, they want to compete, and there is nothing bad with that when we're talking about competition, right? It's normal to be willing to perform and to win. Now, I think it's important at the youth level to redefine what winning means. You talked about being successful earlier. The same. What does it mean to be successful? And again, being successful, winning doesn't just mean winning every game or scoring every basket. It means, in my opinion, well, let me ask you your opinion. What does it mean for you being successful? What does it mean for you winning at the youth level?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much, appreciation, respect for the grassroots and youth coaches just because I feel like, first of all, in a lot of cases, they're getting underpaid. We always joke with some of my colleagues, you work the triple the shift. You work regular job, you work weekends, and you work all the nights. And you're probably not getting compensated enough for it. And you do it for the passion of the game. And probably you understaffed and you have to be accountant, you have to be a bus driver, you have to be a team president, you have to be the referee, you have to be the coach, you name it. And you do it because you love the game, but I feel like each coach has such a huge responsibility, first of all, to be the authority figure, to be the teacher, and not forget this also, life learning lessons for those kids going forward. And not so not don't really make it all about winning and losing. And oftentimes I like to ask, recently had a clinic that I was able to help to organize in Poland with Jimmy Rhodes, one of the best player development coaches, and he presented all the coaches with a great question. If you would get, Stephen Curry at the age of 12, would he become the Stephen Curry we know now? And why he asked this question? Because first of all, we like to put players in labels, early specialization, and we try to work the way we enjoy. But so first of all, you have to ask, do I really get to know this player, who he is as a person, how he likes to work, what he enjoys doing, and then am I able to, accelerate and provide him the right situation for his growth? So I feel like this will be the best answer.
Yeah, I think it's really nice, and again, there are so many things in there. When you talk, for example, about individual skills job, I mean work, you often have players who work individually. They work on things, some of them that they're not even going to put into practice during the game, um, and they are able to do it individually, but then they're not able to do it at the game speed. Another aspect is some of them are very good in individual workout, but then they're not able to compete in the game. They don't have the competitive side anymore out of them. And the last one is often, too often, because it's individual work and it needs to be directed, guided towards something. Some players, and I feel like it's a majority of it, are losing their creativity out of it. So you see, it's three different things. They lose
Yeah.
creativity, they lose the competitive side of it, and they're not able to replicate in the game. So I think it's really important to work on the skills and but to be again specific in that work and to be efficient and to know where to go with it, right? And to keep it fun, like you
Yeah.
said.
I remember early in my NBA career, that was probably one of my first seasons working for the Nuggets. I remember we had a case, and I don't even want to name the player, but he was complaining that he'd been working so hard and working so many hours, and it basically he was not really getting better, and it wouldn't really change his situation. So I remember my GM at the time, he sent me, "Hey, pay attention, go watch this player." And to my surprise, I go on a practice court, and there is a music blasting. There is his brother, his trainer, some of his friends, and they're just shooting half-court shots. So yes, he was in a practice gym maybe for 5 hours. Was it productive? No. Did it help him to get better? No. So like you said, I feel like there are three important factors to really make it work. It's gonna be fun, it's gonna be competitive, and it's gonna push you through your limits. So I feel like every youth player, before each basketball camp, individual practice, you have to ask yourself those questions, and at the conclusion of that activity, what are the answers?
Awesome. No, that's really good. So again, I think what you said earlier about coaches is really important to come back to the situation, at least in Europe. I think in US, there are similarities to at the youth level, where many are underpaid. Many coaches do it for passion. They not only have to take care of the organization, the kids, the coaching thing, but also the parents. Sometimes becomes complicated to deal with as well. So how can you ask for a coach to be dealing with so many things and be perfect at all of them? You know what I mean? Like a coach might be better to handle one thing than another, but how can you have one person, as passionate as they might be perfect at everything that they do? Because at some point it becomes overwhelming. And once again, they can be very good in preseason when they're fresh mentally and physically, but they might have other things to take care of aside of their family, their ambition, their professional life, and then in the end, they might carry a burden through the season, and it might be becoming complicated to handle it all, right?
Yeah, it always comes at expense of something, right? So even if it's for free, you always got to ask yourself, what does it cost? Cost might be your time, your emotional energy, your fatigue, lack of sleep, you name it, right? So there's a hidden cost to it. And I feel like second of all, like especially I see more in Europe, there's much more small academies. I call it like a one-man band that the basketball coach here, his own president, owner, and a coach. So it's difficult to kind of grow in that situation because there is no person that can be a mentor for you. There is no second set of eyes, as I like to call it. There is no mentor. There is no development path for you to improve. And I feel like it's absolutely normal if you struggle with something, just ask someone else for advice, right? And I feel like this is something that a lot of situations coaches are missing just because they will just work by themselves.
Yeah, and again, when we talk about the mental game right now, we talk about coaches, and you said they want to work by themselves. You expressed earlier vulnerability, and it takes vulnerability to be able to open up, to someone else. Coach is the same than players who are high competitors. They have egos. And how do you manage your ego knowing that, look, I have what it takes, I have the knowledge, I have the passion to coach or to play. But then in the end, I need to be open to others and to receive feedback. So once again, to do so, it cannot just be theoretical. You got to be in an environment where you know that it's healthy. You cannot just go there to go there, and then you feel underpaid. You feel like you don't work with the right people around you, and then expect the situation to be successful in the end, because it won't be. So I feel like it's really challenging for many people in the world of sports and here in basketball to say, look, I want to combine everything. I want to be able to have the freedom to express myself. I want to be able to work with people that I trust. I want to be able to open up and be listened to or have feedback from. I mean, we're talking about you, as much as you expressed earlier and you detail everything that you do at the pro level with the Nuggets and all of the tools and the standards and the execution and the detail oriented process of it all. As much as for the youth level, we cannot expect it to be that detail oriented. And so therefore there are flaws coming out of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why again we are so fortunate, so privileged, so lucky at the NBA level. And this is, like you said, pretty much a finish line, and this is not a reality for everyone. I'm actually a huge proponent of the coaching staff and front office setup, that you have people that coaches. Your job is to try to win the next game. Front office, your job is to put the best roster for the next season already. So you look on two different perspectives. You support each other.
Right.
You're a sounding board for each other. Uh, or is normally you argue, you have different points of view, but only for you to actually come together and come better out of it. So this is something that I really enjoy working in this type of system, uh, because I feel like you said, coaches oftentimes are overwhelmed. And then second thing that I really face on daily basis with coaches, even here in Poland, that what really gets you up to the level of success or to become a head coach, it doesn't make you a successful head coach. And just to explain, if you're a very good assistant coach, your main job is cut the video, help to organize the practice. Once you become a head coach, you all of a sudden you get less floor time. Now you have to move the board, owner, media, press, manage the staff, and so it's not that you are bad at your profession, but maybe you're not equipped and qualified to succeed in a new one. And that's why I feel like in the US in general is more of a growth mindset, and also people are more willing to share their experiences, their knowledge, experience, because either you can learn from your own mistakes, but not everybody has enough time, or you can learn from mistakes of someone else. So this is, I'm a huge fan of this, topic, that you have a board of directors, your personal board of directors, 3 to 5 people you can call on any topic and just ask them, what would you do? What would you advise me? At the end of the day, you are the one who makes decisions, but I feel like it's very helpful to have different perspectives.
Nice, nice. Um, if we go back to the Nuggets, do you work? And I feel in the NBA there was something mandatory or what, but how is the organization working with the mental side of things? Because I know, like, and I've been, I've had in the podcast also sports psychologists working in the NBA before and things, but I think it was more done in a way of let's just have this possible, let's just have them in an office, or let's just have this done, and not interacting on a daily basis with the coaching staff and the players. You know what I mean? So, what's the situation up to date, and how is it working in the Nuggets?
Yeah, like you said, every NBA franchise has a different approach to it. Some of them they have, mental coach or psychologist full time around. Some of them they have it on site in the facility. Some of them they have externally. And I don't think there is a right answer to it. I feel like every situation calls for a different solution. And you know it better than anybody that it can be forced upon. Players they need to feel this need, so it needs to be made available to them. And we, with the Nuggets, we believe that the best motivation is education. So we provide the opportunities, we talk about them, we try to showcase them from time to time, and whoever is ready, the calling is going to find him. So we have, 2 mental experts available all the time. We do a lot of workshops, we do a lot of meetings. We have heavily involved HR department, not only for the players, but as a real, healthcare struggles, coaching staff, scouting staff. Everybody has his own issues that he's dealing with, and you never know. And it's very important to have a transparent and culture that is open. There's an open line of communication. But for us, we try to make sure that everybody is taken care of as far as having somebody who's directly assigned to them. And there's a huge value of having a large coaching staff, but also having many either ex-players or players who are about to retire, and they can serve as mentors. So maybe they're not, necessarily getting paid to be mental coaches, but oftentimes we laugh and joke that their job and the main responsibility is to be a mentor for a young player.
No, for sure. Like it's very, and we talked about environment earlier. That's one part of it, to have people that they can respect from their past experience as players, and who understand the game and they can connect with. And that's one side of it, because of what I believe you explained and addressed. I feel like the mental health experts that you address is more destined to the mental health side, and not specifically to the mental performance, which to me right now, it's a personal opinion. I feel like a lot of people around the world are interested in this, but it's confusing because some of them think like they want to, they mean well. Let me contact you when there is a problem to start with. So it should be to fix a problem. And the second thing is it's about the mental health, the emotional regulation, things like this. And it stops to this. But we talked about it earlier in the thing. Like if you have the right mental approach, you're able to produce better performance. Okay, you're going to be less confused. You're going to have more clarity. You're going to go with more intensity. You're going to have better decision making. So this is a mental health. Of course, mental health impacts performance, but there is also mental performance in that way where I feel like right now, people around the world are too confused about this because the mental side is just toward the mental health side. And I believe mental health is a huge um, like foundation of it, but it's not the only thing into the mental game in basketball and in sports in general. But right now we're talking basketball. And that's why I believe that mental health should be one, mental performance another one. And I personally also work with basketball IQ with the people that I work with. So to me, they're all combined together. All of them, in my opinion, that's my definition of the mental game in basketball. But I understand again, like how people can be misguided or don't really know who's doing what, why Nico is doing this and why that one is doing this and what that one is doing that, you know? So, and then outside of the content, like you said, then there is the connection. Who can you connect to? You know, some people can connect with me and some people might not like me, might not like the way I speak, might not like my energy, might not like my face. I don't know. And you cannot force that. So at some point, you cannot work with everybody. And that's why it's very important to have several people working in such an organization like yours. But I believe it's important to make sure that we do not limit the power of the mental game to just mental health and understand that mental health is just one very important topic of it, but there is also mental performance and basketball IQ that can go with it too.
Yeah, I mean, especially lately, we even put more emphasis on the high performance and how to help players because there is more and more frustration coming out of players that have been putting the hard work in and I don't see the results.
Yeah.
So I would say we try to optimize it, and that's why in my book, in my definition, the mental performance is also a simple thing as being able to be focused. Because sometimes players of one thing is in a huddle, in a timeout, there's 60 seconds heated conversation, a few words, and players forget. So how they can actually activate themselves to be fully focused and carry that information on the floor, I believe is also a skill, and this is something we do. But also what we try to do, we try to customize and come up with the best approach as far as the motor learning skills. Some players are visual, some players are movers. They need to be put in situations. So for some players, it makes no sense to watch a video for 1 hour just because this is not the way they're able to capture and process information. And this is something that we also try to do. So you try to smuggle it in, as I like to say, even without trying to name it, because I feel like oftentimes players, whenever they hear sports psychologists, mental, they kind of get upfront and they kind of back out. But then they realize it's all part of what you are doing. For us, even the hand-eye coordination, playing the card games, board games. We have table tennis to be able for players to activate with different signals. So this is also part of the high performance training, if you ask me.
No, I completely agree. And again, like you see how the how simple as the conversation can be understood, the complexity of it when you want to go and dive deep in there. And once again, it takes time to process. When you explain the difference of players dealing with the learning or with the timeout situation, it's a very common one. Of course, having coaches being aware of those things, it's already a huge thing, right? To be able to know who to talk to, what are their needs, and understand their profiles. But then it's about again not just doing it one time, but being able to repeat it again and again and again to be consistent at it to make sure that it's efficient in the long run. You know.
Yeah, I mean, especially in my case, I cannot really speak for some other NBA franchises, but with the Nuggets, we are so fortunate with our ownership group. Mr. Stan Kroenke and his son, Josh Kroenke. They're one of the most successful sport families. They own, Los Angeles Rams that they won the NFL with. They own Colorado Avalanche that they won the NHL with. They own Nuggets and they own Arsenal, and all of those teams are winners. So they may have to know a thing or two about winning. But for me, everybody asks me, what is the hidden secret? What is the formula for success? Is just the open line of communication. Like you said, better being safe than sorry. So being proactive before the problems arise, and just having job description. Everybody knows what he's responsible for, and everybody knows whenever there's an issue or a problem, who to talk to. What was a procedure in place, so to speak.
I completely agree with you. Rafal, I think we're gonna eventually stop right here. It's gonna be almost 1 hour. I think we could go, like always, for another hour or so. But it was very rich in information. I liked how we were able to discuss, of course, your role within the Nuggets and come back to it in the end, to your vision, to youth basketball, to the Polish Federation and the development out of it. I think it's very, very valuable information that you shared, and I'm happy that you answer positively to the invite. And I hope we'll get the chance to meet again in person when you stop by Lithuania or around the courts, and that we can share some more about our visions.
Yeah, of course. Again, thank you so much for the invitation. It just went by so fast, and we could probably, kept going for another hour or two, but I just can't wait and look forward to our other meetings and to see you soon. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that.